Hello, everybody. What's going on? What's happening? This your girl Tiffany here, live in effect. And today, I am live to talk about what does it mean to have cultural and social value. I'm bringing up this subject matter for a reason, because all the time when you hear FBA and ADOS, the first thing they mention is someone is taking the culture, or people taking our culture, people taking away our this, that, and other. Now we have to ask a question. Well, what does it mean to have a culture? What does it mean to have cultural values and social values? And how is our culture is centered? What is it really based off of? What is it that we can have that we can say that this is really our culture per se? So before I even go into my thought and my perspective, let's look up where a culture is and let's look up what social values are. Now, if you want to, you can go to Google. Watch this. Hold on, let me see. For some reason it's not showing up. Okay, there we go. All right. So now, what is the concept of culture? Now, we can look this up on Google. And according to Google research, it says the arts and other manifestation of human intellectual achievement regarding collectively, right? And then there's the second definition, which is the customs, art, social institution, achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. All right. And then there's the biology term, which means maintain in conditions suitable for growth. All right. So now let me summarize what it means to have a culture. So to have a culture means to have some form of commonality. You got to have a commonality. Let me break it down in its simplistic form. So to have a culture means that you got to have the ecology. What is ecology? That means you have to have a relationship with your environment, correct? Okay. That means organisms who have a relationship with their environment. So when you have a relationship with your environment, that brings about community. Okay. So and within that community, when you have common ideas, when you have common struggles, when you have common ideologies and traditional practice that is combined together, that's what makes a culture. All right. Now, let's talk about social values. Okay. Let's look at what social values are. All right. So, social values. Social value is a principle that champions the holistic well-being of both current and future generations, emphasizing the importance of supporting both individual welfare and planetary sustainability. It traverses three central areas. Watch this. One is social, which is this revolves around enhancing the well-being of individuals and community, advocating for interconnectedness and mutual support. Second is economic, which is this focuses on the promotion of economic policies, businesses, practice that uplift societal well-being, recognizing that economic prosperity should be intertwined with societal progress. All right, and then third one is environmental. This stresses the criticality of substantial process which look after both the social and physical environment, ensuring a viable future for all. Okay, so now if you go down a little bit further, it says social value serves as an introspective tool proponing individual communities and organizations to reflect on the broader repercussions of their actions on societal value and future generation. It nurtures an ethos of social consciousness and encourages a holistic view of progress and development. Okay. Furthermore, it provides a comprehensive framework for measuring the impact of actions, extending beyond tangible economic metrics to embrace expansive societal and environmental consideration. All right, so basically, social values is focusing on bringing about enhancement for the current and future generation, right? So that's what social values deal with. Now, cultural values and social values go hand in hand. All right. And with that being said, that's what advanced the community. Now, in what ways is the Black community being more advanced and productive? In what ways? And I want to shout out to brother Robert Perkins. Okay, the brother asked a question. He asked the question. He said, what makes us a culture? What brings Black people together? And people name music, people name barbecues, particularly hip hop music. That's what people name. But he asked, well, what else bring people together? Because now we have to get down to this. This is why we have to have this conversation. Because if you're talking about politics, okay, struggle is one thing. All right. Now, when we talk about politics, right, one of the most important aspect of having political values is to have the cultural and social values. If you're lacking within social and cultural values, then your political values is not going to matter. Well, where are you getting at, Tiffany? What I'm saying to you is, if you don't preserve your cultural practice, if you don't recognize social values within your community, then you're not going to be able to develop political sustainability. You're not going to be able to properly bring about political values within this country. And I'm going to say this for the record. Sitting up here as someone who called themselves FBA and ADOS, right? And dissing people from the other part of diaspora is not going to gain you politics or respectability in this country. Again, you're not going to gain politics or respectability in this country thinking that you're going to diss, other Black people from the Caribbean islands, from Latin America, or from the continent. It's not going to gain you that politics or respectability. It's not. And we're so quick. Well, certain individuals are so quick to say, well, these people still in our culture. These people are talking down on us, calling us lazy, this, thing, other. Well, isn't it the same thing that we do in our community, call each other lazy? Do we not do that? Now, this is funny. I hear people that have a smoke for the Caribbean people, right? And for the African people. But you don't have the same smoke for when you got the Jewish people and white people alike that made lucrative income off of what we have created within our community. There's not the same smoke for those individuals. These people are billionaires. These people have made billions of dollars off of entertainment of Black people. off the music of black people. Now, while you're hollering out culture, culture, what are you doing to sustain it? What are you doing to passing down the value as a collective? Because there are certain individuals that's trying to sustain the culture which our ancestors has given us. However, there are those in our community who don't value those cultural values or those social values. Now, let me say this. I hope you don't think that the people who have Caribbean ancestors, I mean, not Caribbean ancestors, Caribbean parents or African parents, I hope you don't think that they never lived in the ghetto. I hope you don't think they never grew up in the hood. I hope you don't think they ain't never grew up in the hood. And Ghetto Boy says it the best. The world itself is a ghetto. The world is a ghetto. But I hope you don't think that there was no Caribbean and African people that was marching with Dr. King during the civil rights movement. I hope you don't believe that there was no Caribbean African people living in the hood at one point in time. I hope y'all don't believe that. So what sustains a culture? What sustains a social values? If you cannot sustain your culture and your social values and do not look at the problem within your community as a collective, then you cannot talk about politics. You cannot incorporate politics. And the reason why we include people that are Caribbean, people that are Afro Latinos, and African people because we share common values, right? We share common goals with those individuals. Now, I have a book called The Almanac of African Americans Heritage. Okay, I'm gonna show you this book right here. Now, in this book, I'm going to point out the things that some of us might be familiar with and some of us may not be familiar with. And when we talk about culture in the black community, we're going to find out that it traces back to our African ancestors. It traces back to Central and West Africa. That's what we're going to find out. So let's look up in this book. Let's talk about families. Okay? Let's talk about family. Family structures within the black community. The extended family, which is temporary or long-term resident, right? Intermediate relatives, distant relative, unofficially adopted person, play mother, brothers, unrelated persons, foster care, and adopted persons. And then you got a blended family, right? You got married couple with children. You got single parent families. You got common law, which means that people claiming to be husband and wives, but they're not technically married. Oh, you got shared residence without marriage. You got single person households. Okay. Now, let's talk about the concept of extended family. Okay. Now, this is dealing with culture. Extended family has always been very practical within the black community. All right. And we can go as far back as slavery, where you had extended families, meaning that you had people who were related to each other. Then you had those who were not related to each other living in the same household. All right. So let's go ahead and let me get into the article about the concept of extended family in the black community. Now, in the past, I believe I have done this video, but it's been a while, so I can go back and revisit the subject. Let's talk about extended family. All right, give me. All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about it. Let's talk about why extended families are very important within the Black community. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and post my screen up. All right, here we go. So now let's look on the National Library of Medicine. It talks about racial ethnic differences in extended family, friendship, figurative kin, and congressional informal support networks. All right, so now, all right, let's start from the top. It says involvement with kin and non-kin is an essential component of daily life for the vast majority of Americans. Family and friendship support networks are important for coping with the ongoing stresses of daily life. Okay, providing a place to live when confronting homelessness and in coping with physical and mental health problems. This explores differences between African Americans, non Hispanic whites, and Caribbean blacks on several measures of family, friendship, figurative kin, and religious congregation based informal support networks using data from the National Survey of American Life. Okay. And it says the literature review began with a discussion of the family solidarity model as the theoretical perspective, framing our analysis of kin and non-kin relations and social support. This is followed by a review of research finding on black-white differences in family and non-kin support networks and a review of available information on an informal support networks within the Caribbean black population in the United States. Okay. Now let's go down here. So it said research on black-white differences for receipt of support from family members have yield mixed results that can be characterized by three general collection of findings. One of the studies, one set of studies indicate that blacks are more likely than whites to give and receive assistance from their support networks. Okay, this finding was especially evident in research studies conducted in 1980s through the early 1990s. Okay. Another set of studies indicates that whites are more likely to give and receive support than black. Finally, a third set of studies found either no black white differences in kin support networks or that depending upon the measure used, black or whites had greater levels of involvement in kin network. Okay. So basically the importance of that having a blended family is to be able to have the support system and the network. There's a concept that it take a village to raise a child. That's an African proverb. Okay. And we have taken on that African practice, the custom, because in the African culture, they believe that, the people within their village are the family. You know what I'm saying? They don't go by the concept of the fact that you have to be blood related to be a relative. No, we are a family. We all pitch in together. So I can give you another example. The concept of cousins, right? In the African culture, cousins are basically considered as brothers and sisters. If they grew up together, you basically like brothers and sisters. And that's very similar within our community, within the Black community. We're brothers and sisters. If we all grew up together, we are brother and sisters. So that means we value one another. We see some form of importance in each other. So when we see the importance and we see the values, we come together, right? Now, I know people have made arguments with me saying that, well, everybody can't come together. That's true enough. I had one person tell me that, well, there is tribalism, this thing, other. That's true. Yeah, there is tribalism. However, however, there are people who go beyond the concept of tribalism and have a better understanding, right? So, such as our ancestors, when they came here to America, the concept of tribalism was no longer a thing. It was about gaining freedom. It was about gaining their rights. They knew that they had to come together and work together to be able to bring a stronger community and nation of people. So they brought in their cultural values. They combined all their cultural practice, their traditional practice, whatever was left of them, to create something that we have today. To create the importance, and they even passed down teachings, lessons, proverbs, which brought about social values. All right. So with all these different ethnic groups in the African community, they combine themselves together. So that's why I use the term not only Neo-African, but I also say Creolized African, because that's what we are. We're Creolized because we are composed of multiple groups, ethnic groups that had to come together. They had no choice but to. And they knew that they had something similar in their cultural practice. Their tradition was very similar, but the only difference is they had different nomenclatures for how they do things. So the same thing goes for our Caribbean brothers and sisters, right? There is a minor difference, in the cultural practice, and there's geographical difference. However, we have some commonality with those individuals as well. We have something in common. What do you mean by the ethnic group of intersectionality? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that last time, baby? Help me to clarify what you're saying so that way I can better answer or better give my commentary. But back to what I was saying, right? We all share some form of common interest, whether we know it or not. But how much do we value our culture? Because when we see our culture, the first thing we think about is hip hop, the violence. What commonality do black people have with Caribbean people? That's a good question. Okay, I'll tell you. Certain dishes that we have is pretty similar. There's some minor differences, but certain dishes that we eat is very similar. Um, let's see. Like, for example, language wise. Like when you hear the Creole language of the people in let's say when you hear people from South Carolina, you hear how the Gullah Geechee people talk, right? And the people in New Orleans. It sounds very similar to those in the Caribbean islands. It sounds very similar to those who speak in patois. Okay. Um That's one example. It's multiple things. But again, it's just how it's practiced. But you can see the similarities if you pay attention. Okay, so that's what you're saying. Okay, so you said ethnic or ethnic group is a group of people who identify with each other on the basis of perceived and shared attributes. Yes. Okay, now I get what you're saying. Okay, cool. Yes, that's true. Absolutely. And that was the case with our ancestors. They had to be able to identify with one another when they was here in this country and realize that they had something in common more than what they thought. They had a lot in common more than what they thought they did. The only difference is they had different nomenclature. All right. So now let's go ahead and let me go back into this book. And I recommend you guys get this book right here. The Almanac African American Heritage. All right, so let's look at family life. So, family life, belief in a supreme being. Church and Sunday school are central. Values and discipline based on religious tenets. Religious leaders are held in high regard in the family. Respect for elders and their care. Family members eat together regularly. Hospitality extended to visitors at all times. Husband and wife roles varies. Display manners and respect in public. Remove hats while inside. Ask to be excused from the table. Remain quiet when elders are speaking. Preparing children for appropriate sex, age, and social roles. Parent-child bond center on unconditional expression of love. Extended family support. Providing a sense of well-being. Strong work ethic. Inculcating a sense of cultural history. Family important. Respect for the law. Sharing resources with families. Share responsibility. Generally close family relationships. Maintain close family ties. Teach children strategies for survival. All right, so let's talk about the concept of respecting elders. Respecting elders. That is very vital. That is very vital in the Black community. And here's a book for you guys to read, Black Elders. The Meaning of Age in in American Slavery and Freedom by Frederick C. Knight. The concept of respecting elders. Why respecting elders is so common? Why is respecting elders so important? Why do you have to respect your elders? Because the elders was looked at as those who carry a lot of wisdom, those who've been around long enough, and they live their years on this planet. And so what they do, they're passing on the lessons and sharing their experience to the next generation. However, everybody ain't qualified to be an elder. Again, everybody's not qualified to be an elder. Okay? So elder is not just about your age per se. You know what I'm saying? It's about your ability to be able to pass the wisdom, how well respected you are within your community. That's what eldership is about. But then, there's a lack of that going on in modern times. You don't see too many people showing respect for their elders as much as they used to. You don't see too much of that. Hey, you don't even see too much of family gatherings or people valuing family anymore. What we have is a bunch of individualism. Everyone for themselves. Everyone for themselves. We have a lot of individualism going on, and that brings a major hindrance to us. The concept of respecting elders is almost non-existent. In certain aspects, there are those who still respect their elders, but for the most part, it's almost non-existent. And that's the sad part. It's really sad. It's really sad that we don't value the elders as much as we used to. Hmm. And that's the biggest part of culture. Do I need to go into this book real quick? Let's talk about it. All right, let's talk about the concept of honor. All right, so it says when compared to West Central Africans, West African elders had similar expectation and sat in a comparable place of honor. Being close to the dead, they had favor among the living. They were repositories of knowledge and had skills in discernment. Consequently, they played a critical role in resolving dispute. While they bound people together, elders also distinguished themselves from their subordinates through social displays of wealth and conspicuous consumption. They also use words to shame younger people about their ignorance and make them obedient. In important ways, people became stronger socially as they aged, though not in the bodily ways that Western merchants fantasize. Tied to this broader social and cultural context, elders played an important role in the political arena and placed a check on the centralization of power. Normally, the symbolic and political heads in West Africa were aged. At Cape Mount, Bosman met one leader who was an elderly man, as appeared by his gray head and beard. His name was John de Cabot Monte, so called from the point of that name. All right. It says elders also exercise authority through collective bodies that check the power of individual leaders. Elders also exercise authority through collective bodies that check the power of individual leaders. Hmm. Think about that for a moment. Elders also exercise authority through collective bodies that check the powers of individual leaders. That means they kept people in line. They corrected those individuals that need to be corrected. So when I go to community events, right, before anybody start giving a lecture or anybody speak, the first thing they say, "May I get permission from the elders to speak? May I get permission from the elders to speak?" Because they're trying to see if the elder have anything they want to share or any wisdom they want to impart. If the elders have anything to say, then they allow them to speak. But if the elders does not have anything to speak on, then the person can continue and they can go ahead with their proceeding process. Mm. Now let's talk about ancestors for a moment. Let's talk about ancestors. So it says when West African elders exercised power, they did so in concert with ancestors, seen as an extension of eldership through rituals, memory, and acknowledgement. Living elders invoke the power and influence of the dead. Ritualized collective mortuary practices were keys to making a safe passage between the worlds of the living and the dead. For one, woman elder in Upper Guinea, proper burial involved a series of steps. First, they placed a cloth over her corpse, brought her into the open, surrounded her, and shaded her body. Okay. So in the second stage, men distraught with grief ran about the house of the deceased, continuously and dismally howling in a public expression of honoring the departed. Then women began to lift up their voices in a powerful way that one could determine which of the sexes made the greatest noise. All right. It's an intention with praising the honorable dead. Some West African communities castigated the dead who were deemed not worthy of honor, believing that people carry the weight of their action from the world of the living into the world of the dead. Hence, violating social mores led to the trouble in the afterlife. So on the slave coast, some believed that wicked and damned people went to hell, located below the earth, and elders propagated such beliefs and claimed special occult powers that enabled them to access the realm of the dead. For instance, an old sorceress was said to have visited hell, having seen several of her acquaintances there, and particularly the last captain of the blacks, predecessor of the present Captain Carter, who was there miserably tormenting. All right. And it says elders exercise the power within the context of kinship or tributary relationship, did so in part by claiming access to moral and spiritual forces. All right. Now we gotta look at knowledge. So here's knowledge. Elders exercise power not only through the numbers of years they lived, but also through the amount of knowledge they accumulated. They clung to historical memory, including about political conflict, while on the Gold Coast, Braun got wind of a 1618 conflict between the Ambaru and the Akanis. Having witnessed or heard about the previous conflict, elders at Fort Nassau told Braun that such a battle had not occurred in 100 years. All right. Then it goes on to say through formal and informal modes of training, they learn how to make decisions about the allocation and flow of resources, how relationships should be conducted, and an array of other social and political matters. So, what I'm saying is we learn social values not only from our parents, our community, but we learn them from our elders. Because our elders give us those foundation that we need to carry on. So, I don't know about y'all, but when I was growing up in church, you had elders that will tell you how to sit correctly. If you was a little girl, you don't sit with your leg open, you sit with your legs closed. Right? Make sure you pull down your dress. Okay? Pull down your dress. If you're a male, open up the door for the ladies. Or give your seat up. And then some culture, in some cases, we got a thing where, the father would sit at the front of the table, right? At the head of the table. And everybody else, either sit on the outside or on the other end. So usually it's like the father sit on one end, or the elder, the grandfather might sit on one end of the table. And his wife might sit next to him, right? And then you have it where we pass food around, saying you pass the bowls, you pass the plates around or whatever, okay? Then one of the elements before you eat, you got to start saying prayers. Somebody lead the prayer. Then everybody sit at the table and eat. Okay? So the reason why granddaddy or daddy might sit at the end of the table, right, at the head of the table, because he represents the head of the household. And the reason why, or grandma might sit at the end of the table because she represents the matriarch of the household. And also, I want to bring up another thing. Um, speaking of genders, there's a lack of respect, and I'm going to bring this up. There is a lack of respect for the opposite sex in our community. There is not enough men respecting women, and not enough women respecting men or themselves. But for the most part, we hear so much about protecting women and children, right? But you don't see that very often within our community. That's another thing that make our community broken. There is a lack of protection of women and children. And that's part of the cultural and social values. Now, I'm not saying that everybody was perfect within the African culture or in the Caribbean culture. No. But that was one of the most important values when it came down to culture is providing protection for your community, especially for women and children. And if they're not protected, and if the condition is worse, then guess what? The community is worse off. So when you're looking at the condition of our community, that shows you that it's worse off. Dr. John, I mean not Dr. John, what's his name? Dr. Ben said it the best. Dr. Ben said it the best. He said, if you want to know the condition of a community, just look at the women and look at the children. That goes to show you the condition of a community based on how women and children are operated. Now you might ask, well, Tiffany, why are you bringing up women, this, thing, other? Well, because women give birth to a foundation. Women give birth to a nation. It's not to say that men are not important. You got to remember the communities consist of man, woman, and child. Okay? But women give birth to a nation of people. Women give birth to a nation of people. Okay? She gives birth to both male and females. Now, if she's not being valued and respected, then you really don't have a community. Now, again, how can't you talk about political values without speaking on cultural and social values? How do we go from dealing with culture and social value to just focus on political aspect? Hmm? Hmm? How do you skip over the cultural and social values and focus on political aspect? And for those who say FBA and ADOS, FBA and ADOS, well, why don't you become a political party? Why don't you become a political party to show that you are bringing about representation for the people? But you can't because there's so much friction. There's so much chaos because there's so many different organizations. You don't know how to blend them together. You don't know how to blend them together. We got FBA versus ADOS. ADOS versus Pan African. And then all this versus this thing other. That shows the discombobulation. And then there's not enough accurate information going around to be able to properly execute or bring about political concept and values. But here's the thing. These leaders do not stress the importance of cultural and social values. especially Yvette Carnell, she do not express or stress the importance of culture and social values in the Black community. She does not. She does not. She does not give accurate historical information about culture and social values. Well, that culture ain't got nothing to do with politics. Ain't got Social ain't got nothing to do with politics. Yes, it does. Yes, they do. Culture and social values have a lot to do with politics because they deal with representation. Politics is representing your culture and your social value as a human. I don't think you heard me. Politics is representing your culture and your social values as a collective. That's the purpose of having politics, to bring about representation of the culture and social values that you have as human, as a people. Okay, what makes you a lineage? See, separate lineage. What makes you a lineage? What makes you a lineage? What is a foundational Black America? What is that? What makes you a lineage? Y'all like to throw that word lineage out. Explain to me what makes you a lineage. You might as well be a political party. You have not benefited from white society either. You have not benefited from white society either. You talking about you ain't benefited from Black immigration, okay? You ain't benefited from white society. You still got redlining. Hold on. You still got redlining in the community. There's still redlining. There's still racism. You can't blame that on Black immigrants. You can't see that's the thing. You playing the blame game on Black immigrants. You can't blame the Black immigrants. You have to blame your government, not the Black immigrants. We still have redlining. We still don't have generational wealth. See, y'all quit to talk about white supremacy, but y'all using white supremacy talking points. Y'all using white supremacy talking points. Again, y'all, I see more of y'all attacking Black Caribbean people, Black African people, other African American people. I seen a girl put up a post on Twitter saying that, oh, these Black people, Black immigrants, they don't like us. They don't respect us. We don't like each other. We don't like each other. We don't like each other. We don't like each other in this country as Black people. We don't like each other as Black people in this country. We don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about the self-hate that we have as a collective. We don't want to talk about the self-hate. And this is why we come down to culture and social values. Do we preserve the cultural and social values in our community? No, the hell we don't. We do not. We do not preserve the cultural and social values within our community. Now watch this. Now we can go into the concept about languages, style of languages. Let's talk about it. The style of language is bebop, black dialect, black English vernacular, which is known as African American vernacular English. Okay. Black language, black semantics, Creole, dozens. Dozen is roasting. You know what I'm saying? Ebonics, English, hip hop, jive, numerics, pig, Latin language, prison slang, rap, and slang. So some of y'all might wonder, well, what is a bebop? Let's look up what a bebop is. And if we really cared about our culture, as we say, we will be studying a lot on our history. We'll be trying to learn as much as we can. And we'll do what we can to save those historical information. Think about it. But no, we too busy collectively politicking on what's going on social media as far as somebody fighting each other and these reality shows, these doggone TV shows. That's what we do. We worry about Kendrick Lamar and Drake and all them individuals. That's what we doing. That's what we doing. So let's look up bebop. Okay, so bebop is a form of music, but here it is. Bebop uses chromatic ideas, accidental passing tone, and enclosure to extend lines and allow chord tone to fall on certain beats. Okay, so bebop is dealing with music, right? But it says bebop is considered a modern language. Some say that bebop is one of the easier things to learn in jazz because it has some sort of rules to it and it's quite formula based. Some bebop tactics include understanding how each chord scale or chord tone and concept allow you to better apply tensions and release. Okay. All right, so this bebop concept was used in jazz. All right. Now let's talk about celebration holidays. Celebration holidays. Martin Luther King birthday. Kumba, which is Kwanzaa. Black History Month. Let me see. Hold on. Let me put my screen back up so y'all can see me. Okay. Black History Month, which is February. And speaking of Black History Month, there's so many people been dissing about Black History Month. That's something the white man gave us. No, 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 no. And that's where you got it wrong. Black History Month came about because of Carter G. Woodson, who was a historian. It started off as Negro Week, and the reason why he chose February because of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. That was his reason. So Abraham Lincoln's birthday fall in February, and so did Frederick Douglass. So Abraham Lincoln, according to history, he was the one that helped free the slaves, right, or helped end the slavery. Okay. And Frederick Douglass, he was an abolitionist. So that was the reason why February was chosen as a Black History Month celebration. Now it became recognized by the federal government, right? You know what I'm saying, in the higher ups. However, it was already celebrated. It was already around. It started off as Negro Week by Carter G. Woodson. And how many people know about Carter G. Woodson? Not very many. He was very vital to the black community. He was a top tier for the black community when it came down to history. Now, he didn't have all the access to all the information or all the resources. But what he did was he tried to preserve as much as he could. And that opened up doors for a lot of blacks to become historians. You got Malcolm X Day, which is not a federal holiday, but Malcolm X was born on May 19th. Yeah, he was born on May 19th. So that's Malcolm X's birthday. We got African Liberation Day, which is on May 25th. African Liberation Day was started by Carlo Cooks. It was started by Carlo Cooks. Okay. Then you got Ancestor Honor Day, which is the last Saturday in May. Ancestor Honors Day, which is the last Saturday in May. So how did that come about? Ancestor Day. Ancestors Honor Day. Ancestors Honor Day. Let's talk about that. Let's look that up. Hold on, let me look it up for y'all. All right, so here we go. All right, so African American Holiday Association. African American Holiday Association has added to the culture by its founder, Ayo Hindi Kindi, being the visionary for new holy day alternatives. Black Love Day, which is on February the 13th, started in 1993. Ancestor Honor Day, which was started on May 30th. Unity and Diversity Day, May the 1st, which both started in 1995. And the Ritual of Reconciliation, a new tradition. All right. Okay. And it goes on to say, African American Holiday Association has also helped in the establishing of Martin Luther King holiday, working in close conjunction with King holiday organizer and received a certificate for search service. Due to its community educational outreach, African American Holiday Association has further advanced the community awareness of these holidays, which is Kwanzaa, Juneteenth, DC Emancipation Day, Harriet Tubman Day, Women's History Month, Native American History Month, Grandmother's Day, World AIDS Day, World Asthma Day, Month, International Breed Day, World Breathing Day, Malcolm X Day, Nelson Mandela Day, and alternatives to Thanksgiving and the 4th of July. But how many of y'all know about the Ancestor Honor Day? I bet you not many people ever heard of that, huh? Not many of our people knew about Juneteenth. except for those who celebrate it. All right. Let me go ahead and get back to my screen. Let me get back to my screen. Let's see what else we got on here. Of course, you got Marcus Garvey birthday. You got Umoja Karamaru. Karamaru is the fourth Sunday in November. So it's an alternative to Thanksgiving. Okay. So that basically means unity feast. All right. So basically it's like an alternative to Thanksgiving. These are African American holidays. But again, we so quick. Our people so quick to say, our culture this day and elder wooty 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 woo. Our culture this day and elder. How many of y'all go to the event they have in New York every year? They have a thing in New York where they go up there and pay homage to those enslaved Africans. But again, y'all talking about this thing other, our culture, our culture, our culture. Do you actually preserve your culture? Do you actually love your culture? Do you actually love your community? Do you love the people in your community? I'm looking at the comments. I'm reading. I'm reading the comments right now. And this exactly proving my point. This has exactly proven my point. We got folks talking FBA this. A lot of FBA folks up in here, surprisingly. And nobody gave me an answer to what is a lineage. Nobody gave me an answer. I can go through these comments right now. I get a bunch of everything else, but nobody gave me an answer to what is a lineage. Nobody gave me an answer to what is a lineage. The ADOS say the same thing. This is our lineage. Well, what is a lineage? And what does your lineage consist of? Because I can tell you what your lineage consists of, but you can sit there and deny it. You can sit there and deny it till you blue in the face. But you know what? I kind of understand. Because y'all are selling off this narrative that, oh, those people sold us to slavery. Those African people, they sold us off into slavery. Hmm. Those people, those people. Oh, don't get me started on hairstyles. Hmm. Oh, don't give me that. We got a sister in here. Oh, don't get me started on hairstyles, because I'm gonna bust you with that. Where the black American hairstyles come from, I'm gonna bust you with that. But anyways, y'all sold off this narrative. Our people, our people sold us to slavery. They sold us to slavery. Slavery, slavery, slavery. Not realizing that slavery is more complicated. Slavery is more complicated. Slavery is more complicated than what you think it is. Now, if you want to argue that there was those Africans who sold us into slavery, okay, I'll let you get with that. Yes, there were those who did. There were those who did. There was those who played a part in that. And those Africans were the elites. Those Africans were in the higher class. Those Africans had tribalism. And they had prisoners of war. Okay? So, I mean, I let you get away with that somewhat. But what y'all don't know is there was those who were forced to sell people from their land. That's the part that y'all don't know. Y'all don't know about the coercion. And what y'all don't know is that there were those African kingdoms that fought against slavery. There were those African kingdoms that fought against slavery. I can pull it up for you right now. There was African kingdoms that fought and that stood up against transatlantic slave trade. That fought against it. That was not going for it. But y'all focus on the narrative. Africans sold Africans into slavery. Let's look it up. Let's look at the African kingdoms that was against the transatlantic slave trade. African kingdoms. Let's look it up. Okay, so here's an article right here. I'm gonna read this article real fast. Okay. We're gonna go to the article, all right? All right, follow me, youngins. Girlfriend, we know that Africans are not monolithic. Come on now. We know that. That's why, if you was paying attention to the video in the beginning, this is why. Oh, goodness. This is why you got to pay attention. Africans, we know that they were not monolithic people. Okay, that's why I said we are creolized African, meaning that we are mixed with multiple African ethnic groups. Okay, that means that our ancestors, right, they were from different tribes that combined it together make us what we call today African in the diaspora. All right, so I'm gonna give you the example before I read the article. Let me give you an example of the multiple tribes that we came from. Okay. Oh my God. No one said all Africans were united. Duh. Nobody said they were all united. But there are Africans who are unified. Not everybody's going to be united. Okay? Oh, God have mercy. Oh, my goodness. Lord have mercy. Africans are not monolithic either. No one said that. No one said it. No one said they were monolithic. But what I said was when they came over here to this country as slaves, they had no choice but to come together. They had no choice because they realized it wasn't about tribalism anymore. It was about the fact that they were slaves. They were no longer based on their tribe. They were looked at based on the fact they were called Negroes, or what we know today as niggers. Okay? So the concept of tribalism was thrown out the window. When they got here, they were slaves. So they combined their cultural traditions, elements to give you and I what we practice today. We wouldn't have no black culture if it wasn't for these enslaved African people that came from multiple tribes. That came from multiple tribes. Ma'am. Yikes. Okay. Okay. So now let me give you the names of the tribes that were brought here. Okay. The Barcongo people, the Mende people, which are part of the Mandinka tribes out of Ghana, the Ashanti people, which are part of the Akan tribes, okay, the Iwe, the Fulani, the Hausa, the Igbo, the Yoruba, the Wolof, okay. These are just a few tribes that I named. I named 9 tribes, all right, that came about the Central West Africa region, all right. Those are the 9 tribes that I named. It's more than 9. However, these are the only few, all right, that were brought here to this country. And if you study, if you go to St. Simon Island, Georgia, right, there is an area called Dunbar Creek where the Igbo landing took place. That means the Igbo people were brought through what is called St. Simon Island, Georgia. Okay? So going back to what I was saying before, we are creolized Africans. We are consist of multiple tribes. Whether you want to believe it or not, that's something you gotta take up with personally. But it's the evidence, it's the facts. Now let me get back to what I was talking about. Oh, and he said, and us FBA are mixed with North American indigenous people. Okay, so what, oh, okay, whatever. All right, whatever. Whatever, 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 whatever. Whatever. Whatever, boy. Whatever. Whatever, whatever, whatever. All right, let me get to the point. Oh, let me get out the screen real quick. All right, there we go. I want to answer Norma question. Norman asked a good question. What economic system does the FBA and ADOS folks believe in? Socialism or capitalism? That's a good question because I can tell you what I think they believe in. They believe in capitalism because I don't think there's many of them that's into the socialist ideology, but that's something that you would have to ask them. Okay. All right, so let's go down here. Let's go down to where it says African participation and resistance to the trade. Watch this. Now, for those of you that make the argument, it says, with some early exception, Europeans were not able to independently enter the West and Central African interior to capture Africans and force them onto ships to Americas. Instead, European traders generally relied on a network of African rulers and traders to capture and bring enslaved Africans from various coastal and interior regions to slave castles on the West and Central African coast. So many of these traders acquired captives as a result of military and political conflict, but some also pursued slave trading for profit. Okay, so some of them many of them did it because of the military and political conflict. All right. And there were those who did pursue it for profit. So it says scholars provide various explanation for why African traders were willing to supply enslaved Africans to Europeans for the transatlantic trade. By the early 16th century, slavery already played a major role in some Western and Central African society, and contribute to maritime slave trade system across the Indian Ocean and Mediterranean Sea. Subsequently, some historians argue that Europeans in the Atlantic took advantage of a pre-existing slave trade system in Africa to obtain labor for expanding plantation economies in the Americas. So during the development of the transatlantic trade, West and Central Africa consisted of diverse political and social structures, ranging from large empires to small states, and these groups often conflicted over internal politics as well as economic expansion. Okay, so as noted earlier, though ethnic identities were influential, these groups did not share a common African or Black identity. Instead, they saw cultural and ethnic differences, all right, such as Igbo, Ashanti, Mende, and Fulani, as social divisions. So frequent conflicts between these groups produced captives who could then circulate in the local slave trade system and eventually a transatlantic slave trade. All right. Now go down. It says Europeans also went to great lengths to influence African traders. Listen, watch this. Europeans also went to great lengths to influence African traders and leaders to provide enslaved Africans for the transatlantic trade. European traders encouraged African consumer demands for European goods, formed military alliance to instigate fighting and increase the number of captives, and shift the location of disembarkation points for the trades along the West and Central African coast to follow African military conflicts. Did y'all hear that part? Europeans also went to great lengths to influence African traders and leaders to provide enslaved Africans for their transatlantic trade. European traders encouraged African consumer demands for European goods, formed military alliance to instigate fighting and increase the numbers of captives, and shift the location of disembarkation points for the trade along West and Central African coast to follow African military conflicts. So what they would do is, right, there were Europeans who would go above and beyond to create more conflicts. And you see the keyword instigate, right? They would instigate fights to get the number of captives, to get the number of people they want to bring over here to the America. Now let's go back to the top paragraph, okay? Let's go back to the top paragraph. So I'm not denying that there was no involvement from African people when it came to the transatlantic slave trade. I'm not denying that, okay? Because obviously we can see that here. Now, down here, it shows you the reason why. It says many of these traders acquired captives as a result of military and political conflict. So there was military conflict, right? And there's political conflict. And then there are some that do it for profit. But for the most part, it was about military and political conflict. Okay. So again, we do acknowledge that part. But then also it shows you here that the Europeans had their influence by using coercion and instigating fights within those African kingdoms so they can get more captives. All right. Now let's go down. Watch this. It says West and Central African coast to follow African military conflicts. Right. So in areas of West and Central Africa where slavery was not prevalent, European demand often expanded the presence of the institution trade. But European traders still generally work within terms set by African rulers and traders who negotiate their own interests in these trading and military alignments. Right. So it says, for example, when the profits of the slave trade did not outweigh the loss of local labor caused by the transatlantic trade, African leaders could refuse to supply European demands. So still, the pressure from Europeans' consumer interest in African slavery were great. The social instability that followed military conflicts inevitably changed the resources of African groups. So many Africans turned to the transatlantic slave trade to expel their opponents or to garner profits, right? The population loss and disruptive effects on social, political, military, and labor system caused by the transatlantic slave trade vary in scales depending on the African region and group. Watch this. As a result, scholars still debate the long-term impacts of the transatlantic slave trade in West and Central Africa. So it says, regardless, the suffering of separate families and the experiences of enslavement during the transatlantic slave trade were universally devastating from the victims of the transatlantic slave trade. Now let's talk about that for a moment. The suffering of separate families. You don't think that those in the continent felt some form of great suffering that their family members were taken from their land and sent off to another location? You don't think they suffer from that? That's the evidence to show you that even those that are on the continent are the descendant of those who were enslaved. Because in that article, it shows you that the separation of family brought about devastation. It brought about devastation not only to those that were brought here into this country, but to those who was impacted by losing their loved ones. Okay? So many of y'all make an argument that these people are not descendant of slaves. You don't know that because you ain't studied enough about the history. In fact, they are descendant of those that has been enslaved in this country. However, they just may not live in the diaspora. They live in the continent, but their ancestors were taken out the land. And the following groups that I named, the following tribes, right, that were taken from those lands and brought here to America, those are their ancestors. Those are their descendants. So if you think that those African people who could not have a say-so, who could not have a voice in this, wasn't impacted by their loved ones being taken away, you got to be kidding. You got to be kidding. You got to be out your mind. Because that's what brings about the social and cultural value is family. When your family is departed from you or taken away from you, that brings down the cultural values, that brings down the social values. All right. So if you think that these people were not impacted by their loved ones being taken away, you are sadly mistaken. You are sadly mistaken to believe that they were not impacted by the concept of slavery. Okay. So you cannot blame the whole continent. You can't blame everybody. You know what I'm saying? You can't do that. Let me go ahead and let me what am I trying to do here? Okay, cool. Okay, dokie. All right, cool. All right, so let's go down here. It says, let's scroll down. It says, throughout the trade, the Africans who were enslaved or threatened with enslavement threatened with enslavement, consistently resisted the dishumanization confines of this situation. Again, throughout the trade, the Africans who were enslaved or threatened with enslavement consistently resisted the dehumanization, the humanizing confines of this institution. My bad. Villages and town built fortification and warning system to prevent attacks from traders or enemy groups if captured and forced onto ships for the Middle Passage. Enslaved Africans resisted by organizing hunger strikes, forming rebellions, and even committing suicide by leaping overboard rather than living in slavery. Okay? And it says, scholars believe that roughly one slaving voyage in every 10 experienced major rebellions. These rebellions were costly for European traders and led them to avoid certain regions. For this resistance strategy, known such as Upper Guinea, except during periods of high slave trade market demand. Okay. This resulted in fewer Africans entering the transatlantic slave trade from these regions, which suggests that African resistance strategies could be effective. All right, so let's look up Upper Guinea. Okay, so Upper Guinea is one of the 4 geographic regions of the Republic of Guinea, being east of Fouta Djallon, north of Forest Guinea, and bordering Mali. All right. So now let's go into Upper Guinea resisting against the slave trade. All right, so here we go. All right, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Watch this. Watch this. Watch this. Watch this. Now, let's go down. Sometimes trading between Europeans and African leaders were not equal. For example, Europeans influenced Africans to provide more slaves by forming military alliances with warring African society to instigate more fighting. which would provide more war captives to the African rulers to trade as slaves for European consumer goods. So also Europeans shift the location of disembarkation points for the trade along the African coast to follow military conflicts in West Central Africa, right? In areas of Africa where slavery was not prevalent. I read that before, but I'm reading it again. It says African Europeans profit from the slave trade. However, African population, the social, political, and military changes to African societies suffer greatly. So, for example, the Mazi kingdoms resisted the Atlantic slave trade and refused to participate in the selling of African people. Okay? The Mazi kingdoms resisted the Atlantic slave trade and refused to participate in the selling of African people. However, as time progressed, more European slave traders entered to West Africa and were having more influence in African nation, and the Mazi became involved in the slave trading in 1800s. Okay? All right, and then watch this. It says, although there were African nations that participate and profit from the Atlantic slave trade, many African nations resist, such as the Jola and Balanta, right? Some African nations organized into military resistance movements and fought African slave raiders and European slave traders entering their village. For example, the Akan, Essi, Fitu, Igafo, and Agona and Asibu people organized into the Fonte coalition and fought African and European slave raiders and protect themselves from capture and enslavement. But this is the part that you guys don't know. Now, who are the Mazi kingdoms? Watch this. The Mazi kingdoms, sometimes referred to as the Mazi Empire, were a group of powerful kingdoms in modern day Burkina Faso, which dominated the region of the upper Volta River for hundreds of years. The largest Mazi kingdom was that of, I'm not even going to try to say this word, but anyway, I don't want to mess it up. Anyhow, and then also the first kingdom was founded when the Gomba warriors from the region that is present day Ghana and Mende warriors moved into the area and intermarried with local people. All right. So according to the information, the Mazi kingdoms, they fought and they resist against slavery. All right. See, that's the part that you'll never know. That's the part that you're not ever taught or you're not ever told about. And then right here it says, although there were African nations that participate and profit from the Atlantic slave trade, many African nations resisted, such as the Jola and Balanta. So who are the Jola? The Jola people, okay? They are an ethnic group founded in Senegal, Gambia, and Guinea-Bissau. All right? Watch this. The Balanta is another group of people that fought against the transatlantic slave trade, okay? It means those who resist in Mandinka. They are an ethnic group found in Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, Senegal, Cape Verde, and the Gambia. All right. And then, you had the Akan group, right? You got the Ngona. They formed into the Fonte coalition and fought African and European slave raiders and protected themselves from capture and enslavement. Okay. Watch this. It says Chief Tomba was born in 1700 and his adopted father was a general from the Jalanke speaking people who fought against the slave trade. Tomba became the ruler of the Bonga people in present day Guinea-Bissau in West Africa and made alliance with nearby African villages against African and European slave traders. His efforts were unsuccessful. Tomba was captured by African traders and sold into slavery. All right, and it says the Hominy King Agaja Trudeau from 1718 to 1740 opposed the Atlantic slave trade and refused to sell African people and attacked the European forts built along the slave coast in West Africa. All right. Oh, you got another one, my favorite. Donna Beatrice Kempavita in Congo and Senegalese leader Abdul Al-Qadir advocated resistance against the forced exportation of Africans. In the 1770s, leaders Abdul Qadir Khan opposed the Atlantic slave trade through Fouta Toro, present-day Senegal. So Abdul Qadir Khan and Fouta Toro nation resisted French slave traders and colonizers who wanted to enslave Africans and Muslims from Fouta Toro. Okay. Other forms of resistance against the Atlantic slave trade by African nation was migrating to different areas in West Africa, such as swamps and lake regions to escape slave raids. So in West Africa, the Efik, if that's how you say Efik, slave dealers participate in slave dealing as a form of protection against enslavement. Okay, so these people, they were slave dealers, right? They participate in slave dealing because they wanted to be protected against enslavement. So African resistance movements were carried out in every phase of the slave trade to resisting marches to the slave holding stations, resistance at the slave coast, and resistance on slave ships. All right. So therefore, there were those Africans who resisted against the slave trade, who stood up against the African traders and the European raiders. They stood up against those people. They even fought those individuals. But again, that's something that you're not going to learn. But see, people get off this confirmation bias that what Africans sold African into slavery, which I'm not saying that's not true, because part of that is true, but there's more to it than just that. You can't just go off of that narrative alone. You can't go off that narrative alone where they just sold our people. It was a lot going on during that time period. Okay. It was a lot going on during the time period. But you cannot just use that one narrative. So there were nations, there were kingdoms that fought against, they fought their hardest. They fought tooth and nail against the slave traders, against European invasion. They fought so hard. And there were those who did give in and say, okay, here you go. We want your resources. You can have these people. We want your resources. And then there were those who said, there were those who were forced to do so. There were those who were forced to do so. They were under pressure. So it's a lot of conflicting things that was going on during that time period. It was a lot that was going on. A lot. It was a lot that was going on during the time period. And then let's talk about Queen Zinga for a moment, because I heard some people blaming Queen Zinga. And I can understand why people feel some kind of way about her. But Queen Ezekiel was born during a time where there was already chaos going on in the Angola Congo area. She was born in the midst of the chaos, and she was the next to be the leader of the region. So she did what was necessary. She was trying to protect the country, and she was trying to protect its people. So she had no choice but to get caught up, get her foot wet, get her hands dirty. It was a very conflicting time for her. It was very conflicting to the point that she had to get her hands dirty. She had to figure out, well, how do I go about protecting my country? How do I go about protecting the community? How do I keep these individuals from invading my country? And so she figured, okay, well, maybe I will have to give some people up. Now, here's the thing. After the transatlantic slave trade, it backfired. It backfired on the African nation. Why? Because those Europeans came to these same African nation and colonized them. They came to these same African nation and colonized. They colonized Central Africa, the Portuguese. That's why you got people over there in the Congo speaking Portuguese and Spanish. Right? They done invaded Cameroon. That's why you got people in Cameroon that speak French. And the other part of Cameroon, they speak English. So not only the transatlantic slave trade took place, but the colonization took place. These countries end up getting colonized. They thinking, okay, we done traded with these people. It's all said and done. No, the European wanted more. They came back and colonized those people. They colonized them. So it was a no-win situation. It was a no-win situation. It was a no-win situation, man. It's a lot that you have to study into. It's a lot. And I understand the feeling of not liking the concept about slavery. I get it. But it happened. But however, you cannot sit here and deny your lineage. It is what it is. What you gonna do? Drink some bleach and get rid of your African DNA? Well, what you gonna do? You gonna drink some bleach? Because if you drink some bleach, you're gonna get rid of yourself. You're gonna end your own life. You can't get rid of your African DNA. You can delineate all you want to or whatever. You can't get rid of that. Let's see what's. Well, I've been on here for a good minute. God damn. I've been on here for a good ass minute. All right, so let's talk about hair. Because there was a sister in the comment that made some commentaries. Y'all want to talk about culture? Y'all want to talk about fashion and all that? Let's talk about hair. Hair fashion. The Bantu knots. Where did the Bantu knots came from? You know, where women used to walk around with their hair parted up and it'll be like some type of little donuts on each side all around. Those are Bantu knots. Where did the Bantu knots come from? The Bantu knots came from the culture of the Bantu people. Let's talk about the Bantu knots for a moment. Let's talk about it for a moment. So when we talk about hair, whenever I hear women talk about, oh, y'all got our culture, this thing other, you want to look like us, this thing other, okay. Let's talk about it then. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the hair. Because see, what people don't know with the cornrows and all of that, the cornrows, that came out the African tradition. There was a reason why they wore cornrows, because for African slaves, they were trying to use that as a navigation system. So the cornrows became the navigation system as a way to figure out how to get off the plantation and get to freedom. So what they'll do is braid each other hair. And what you don't know is about the rice. So before, African women were put on the transatlantic slave trade, right? Or put on the ship rather. They would have rice in their hair and their hair would be braided up. So in case they get hungry, all they had to do was take the braids out their hair and take the rice out of there and eat it. All right, but let's go. Let's talk about the Bantu knots. Bantu knots. Let's go into the history. And you know, we have so much pride within our hair, but we don't understand the origins of it. All right. So, the history of Bantu knots. Bantu people are a group of ethnic groups in Africa who originate in what is now Nigeria and Cameroon. The hairstyle was created by the Bantu people who used it as a way to keep their hair neat and tidy in hot and humid climates. Bantu knots were also worn as a way to express social status and cultural identity. The hairstyle was brought to the Americas through the transatlantic slave trade and has become a popular hairstyle among black women. Watch this. Bantu knots are a popular hairstyles among black women and have become a symbol of black culture. Hairstyle is a way for black women to celebrate their natural hair texture and embrace their cultural heritage. Bantu knots have also become a way for black women to express their individuality and creativity through different variation of the style. Bantu knots came from the Bantu people, which represent their social which represented their social and cultural identity, right? And they kept their hair neat because it was hot and humid. Okay, the Bantu knots. Since we on this subject, let's talk about some more hairstyles. Let's talk about some more hairstyles. Since we on the subject of culture. Oh, you got dreadlocks, African locks, and Nubian locks. You got cornrows. I already mentioned about the cornrows. Let's talk about micro braids for a moment. Micro braids. Let's look at micro braids. Because micro braids used to be very popular in the 90s and 2000. Nowadays, people wear African twists. Let's talk about micro braids history. Okay, so let's look up the origin of it. Let's look at it. All right. So the origin of micro braids, or just braids in general. All right. So origin of braids. Sims traces the origin of braids back to African culture. Braids have been impressionable throughout history, says Sims. The origin of braids can be traced back 5,000 years in African culture to 3,500 BC. They were very popular among women. Braiding started in Africa with the Himba people of Namibia, says Pace. These people have been braiding their hair for centuries. In many African tribes, braided hairstyles were a unique way to identify each tribe. Braid patterns and hairstyles were an indication of a person's tribe, age, marital status, wealth, power, and region. Braiding was and is a social art. Because of the amount of time it can take, people often would take the time to socialize. It began with the elders braiding their children, then the children would watch and learn from them. Younger children would start practicing on each other and eventually learn the traditional styles. This tradition of bonding was carried on for generations and quickly made its way across the world. It was around the 1900s when braids became most popular around the world. Almost all women, children, and most men in some ways had their hair braided. Okay? All right, so that's the concept of where braids come from. Afro, of course, you know about the Afro that basically represent natural hair. Let's look at African locks and Nubian locks. What is African Nubian locks? I see people wearing those. I bet you some of y'all FBA and ADOS women out there talking about you ain't African this day and other. I see your behinds wearing some African locks. I bet you that. I bet you wearing some African locks and Nubian locks right about now. I bet your behind wearing some doggone Bantu knots on your head. I bet you wearing Senegalese twists, African twists in your hair. I bet you do. But let y'all tell you, y'all ain't now one of them people. Well, then why the hell is you got African twists in your goddamn hair then? Make it make sense. But let's continue. Let's continue. Let's look at African laws. What are the African laws? Watch this. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these are African laws. Okay. Now let's go into the African laws history. Let's look at dreadlocks. All right, let's go into the history. Watch this. According to Cheryl in Encyclopedia here, a cultural history, dreadlocks are dated back to ancient time in various cultures. In ancient Egypt, Egyptian wore Lothic hairstyle and wigs appear on what's it? Okay, appear on bas reliefs, statuary, and other artifacts. Mummified remains of Egyptian with locks wig have also been recovered from archaeological sites, right? According to Dr. DeLongora, braided and locked hair was worn by people in the Saharan desert since 3000 BC. Dreadlocks were also worn by followers of Abrahamic religions, right? For example, the Ethiopian Coptic, okay? The Ethiopian Coptic Bahatawi priests adopted dreadlocks as a hairstyle before the 5th century. Okay, so locked hair was practiced by some ethnic groups in East, Central, West, and Southern Africa. All right, well, let y'all asses tell it. You ain't no African. Let's look up Nubian locks. Let's see, what is Nubian locks? Let's talk about Nubian locks for a moment. Let's look at Nubian locks. What are Nubian locks? I know y'all familiar with this hairstyle because I see people walking around with it. Those are the Nubian locks. Okay? These what you see right here. Yeah, these are the Nubian locks. Hmm. Now let's deal with the history about that. Let's deal with the history, boy. Y'all kill me. Okay, well, let's go into the concept of let's look at how dreadlocks became very popular. So, let's look at how dreadlocks became very popular in America. All right, so hair is not just hair. Okay, it says twisted locks of hair, the complicated history of dreadlocks, right? Watch this. So, different cultures had their form of dreadlock. It says many parts of Africa, locks are associated with strength and only worn by warriors. For example, warriors of the Fula and Wolof of West Africa and the Maasai and the Kikulu tribes of Kenya are all known for locked hair. Interestingly, in Nigeria, among both the Yoruba and Igbo people, locked hair is viewed with suspicion when worn by adults. Although when children are born with naturally matted hair, they are referred to as dada and viewed as spiritual beings. They are celebrated as bringers of wealth, and only their mothers are allowed to touch their hair. So, although dreadlocks have been worn continuously by people of color in Africa, Asia, and the Americas from ancient time up to now, their popularization in the West only occurred in the 70s. This was due to the success of Jamaican-born reggae artist Bob Marley following his conversion to Rastafarianism. Okay. And it says the origin of dreadlocks within the Rastafari tradition is a topic of much debate. Leonard Howell, hailed as the first Rasta, was known to have links with Indo-Jamaican followers of Hinduism and even had Hindu-inspired outlets Gon Guru Magara. This has led many to believe that dreadlocks and the smoking of cannabis was inspired by tradition brought to Jamaica by Indian indentured laborers. Others said that rosters were inspired by the locks worn by warriors of Mau Mau uprising in Kenya during the 50s. It says, although Leonard Howe wore his hair short, it is said that his guardsmen at the Pinnacle commute wore locks as a way to portray strength and instill fear. Another tradition places the origin of dreadlocks with the House of Youth Black Faith, a group of radical young Rastas who formed in the late 40s. They grew their hair into locks as an affront to Jamaican society and to mark their separation from the mainstream. So soon, dreadlocks had become such a contentious issue that the House split into two groups, the House of Dreadlocks and the House of the Psalms. Eventually, the latter was dissolved and dreadlocks became the well-known symbol of Rastafari that it is today. All right, so as you can see, it go back saying that the warriors of the Fulai and the Wolof people of West Africa, they wore dreadlocks, okay? But it also said that it did not become very popular until Bob Marley came on the scene, okay? And dreadlocks, African twist, and all of that is very common here in the South. You will see a lot of people wearing dreads. You'll see a lot of folks wearing a little African twist, all different type of stuff. All right. But guess what? Those type of style came from the African people. But let y'all tell it. They still in the, y'all want to imitate us, our culture, this, that, other. Let me tell y'all something. The African culture, or the black culture here in America, is a creolization of African culture that is mixed with European culture. That's all it is. Okay? So it's been creolized. That's all it is, the creolized version of African culture. That's all the black culture is, the creolized version of African culture mixed with European and some Native American culture, some of Native American, but for the most part, it's African culture blended in with the European culture. So when you go back to Africa, right, and introduce the genres, all the black music over there, basically, you're reintroducing African music as being Creole mixed with European custom. That's all it is. So it's being reintroduced as creolized African music with European custom. Now, I could play on the words of ADOS and FBA. Dang, I've been on here for 2 hours. God damn. And I ain't read everybody comment. Let me see what y'all folks talking about. Y'all going back and forth with each other on here. Y'all been going back and forth with each other on here. All right, but anyways, if I want to play on the word of FBA and ADOS, I would say instead of foundational Black American, I'll say foundational Black African. So if you ask me if I'm FBA, I say yeah, I'm FBA. I'll say yeah, I'm FBA, foundational Black African. That's what I am. Yeah, I'm FBA because I'm going to put my ancestors' identity first before the nationality. Because in my opinion, I feel that it's disrespectful to put American first and then put African last. In my opinion, I say you represent the ethnic group, the lineage, the bloodline of your ancestors first, which is the fact that they were African descended. Then you could bring on your nationality. But if I want to play on that word, it would be foundational Black African, a foundational Black African. Because that's what they were. They were African descended people before they was considered to be Americans. And if I want to play on ADOS, I would say African descendant of slavery, because that's what they were. They were African descendant of slavery before they became Americans. they were African descendant of slavery before they became Americans. That's how I would play on it. That's how I will play on it. So if you ask me, I'm ADOS, I'll be like, yeah, I'm ADOS. I'm African descendant of slavery. That's what I am. I'm FBA Foundational Black African. Yeah, I am. I'll play on those words. I'll play on those words for you. But you know what? Let me stop here because I've been on here for quite some minute. Y'all been going in. I ain't even get a chance to read all the comments. I ain't get a chance to read all y'all comments on here. So, but anyhow, for those of you that's coming in, shout out to the people in the chat. All right, thank you guys. Shout out to you, goofy foundational Black Americans, for coming over here. And some of you ADOS folks, I see y'all in the chat. I appreciate you guys for coming through. I appreciate the chat. Shout out to Santavo. Shout out to Sankara. All right, for those of you that's getting in, you'll have to watch the video from the beginning. You don't have to watch everything because it's 2 hours long. So, you know, you watch what you can. Okay. Um, so with that being said, you guys, I'm about to go ahead and log off of here. I hope you all have a great evening. All right, until next time, I will be coming back doing some more videos. All right, I will come back with some more subject matters that needs to be talked about. All right. Now, would I be coming back doing some more ADOS and FBA videos? Oh, I will. I have some more to talk about. I have some more to talk about pertaining to these groups of people, the FBAs and the ADOS. I have more information to share. But anyways, y'all have a good evening and peace and power elevation. This your girl Tiffany, and I'm out. Thank you.